Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Sarasvati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Samasta Janakalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. We invoke the grace of Bhagavan and Pujya Gurudev as we start Jaya, as we continue our story of Jaya. First, we'll recap what we did last time so that it's fresh in everyone's mind, and then we will go forward with our story. Okay? So let me go ahead and share so it becomes easy for us to understand. Last week, what we saw was the story of Dronacharya. And we saw here that Dronacharya is actually married to Kripi. And Kripi is the sister of Kripa. And Kripacharya was actually the teacher of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. But what happens is Dronacharya comes to Hastinapura to seek revenge from Drupada. And he starts to teach the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and he meets Ekalavya. And we talked about this episode where he asks for Ekalavya's right thumb. Now, we saw that Dronacharya loved Arjuna. Although all of them were his students, Arjuna excelled. And we saw the stories of how Arjuna excelled. And we saw the devotion, the power of devotion of Ekalavya. How when you are truly devoted to someone or something, you can actually get that power. You can get that potential just by doing mere upasana. Dronacharya also had a son called Ashwathama. And although Dronacharya himself was a Brahmana, he still took up this warfare. And he also taught Ashwathama certain things which maybe he shouldn't have taught Ashwathama. Then we saw the advent of Radheya or Karna, and how Kunti Devi actually, she used that boon before she married Pandu, and she had a son with Surya Devata. And this son she put in the water, and this son was found by Adiratha and Radha, and hence his name was called Radheya. Now this Karna or Radheya, what happens as he grows up, his mother tells him the true story that he's actually born of this very, very royal lady, and that Radha and Adiratha are not his real parents. But he goes now to seek to be an archer. He wants to learn warfare, and he goes to learn from Parashurama. But when he goes to Parashurama, he lies about his background, and he says that he's a Brahmana because Parashurama doesn't like Kshatriyas. And he is found out, so Parashurama curses him, and therefore he says, when you are in desperate need of an astra, your memory will fail you. And then further on, this Karna also, he shoots a cow. We thought it was a deer, but it was a cow. And so therefore a Brahmana curses him that when you are fighting with your heart's deadliest enemy, the wheel of the chariot will sink into the ground. So this is the fate of Karna or Radheya. And so now I hope everyone's on the same page. Yes? Okay. So now he goes to Hastinapur. And we saw what was happening in Hastinapur. Where we left off was there was a tournament being arranged. And there was this tournament being arranged by Dronacharya. It's like a graduation for all of the Kauravas, the Pandavas. And anyone went to that tournament. And so, first Duryodhana and Bhima, they were both very good with the gada or the mace. So they were, fighting against each other. And then, it became too much. So Dronacharya said, okay, stop this. And then Arjuna came and he displayed his prowess. He took his bow and his arrow, and he, accomplished incredible feats that nobody could really match. And, Dhritarashtra was there and Vidura was there, and Dhritarashtra was asking Vidura, what's all this screaming? What's all this noise? What's all this sound? And Vidura said, that's Arjuna. Everyone loves Arjuna. And Dhritarashtra's heart burnt with jealousy. And so Arjuna was the hero of this tournament. And it was a huge, huge stadium. How many people were there? And just as, Arjuna finished displaying his heroic tendencies, a clap of thunder sounded. And somebody came to this tournament. And this someone walked like a lion. He looked so glorious, so tall, so bold, and so brave, and everyone just looked at him. He twanged his bow and he said, let me tell you, Arjuna, what you have shown, I can also do. And this man, he takes his bow and his arrow, and everything that Arjuna did, he could also do. And everyone was shocked because nobody could compare to Arjuna. But all of a sudden, this man, so glorious, walked in, and he could compare to Arjuna. He, in fact, excelled Arjuna. And Duryodhana jumped off his seat, and he was loving it, that someone was better than Arjuna. And this man, he wanted to challenge Arjuna to a single combat. But what happened is, when he was doing this, when he was about to say, Arjuna, I want to challenge you to single combat. Let me see what we can do. Kunti faints. She faints because she realizes that this man who wants to challenge her son Arjuna is also her son. And that was Karna. It was Karna who came to challenge Arjuna. And the two of them showed in this stadium, and Kunti fainted because that was the first time she saw her son, her firstborn son. And Vidura just told her to keep quiet, don't say anything. And she could not say anything. And she was watching two of her sons. They didn't even know that they were brothers. One was Arjuna, and it was like the clouds were covering him because his father was Indra. And so all the dark clouds were like covering him. The other one was Karna. And as the clouds covered Arjuna, the bright sun also came towards Karna because his father was Surya. And both of them looked at each other, ready to engage. Just then, what happened? Kripacharya comes. Kripacharya comes and says, let us observe the rules of this war, of this combat. Here we have Arjuna, the noble son of Pandu, who is the prince of the Kuru dynasty. Please tell us, what is your background? Who are you? And this Karna bit his lip because he was a Sutaputra. And Duryodhana sprang up and said, do you know that there are different kinds of kings? It's not just somebody who's born to be a king, but even someone who's brave is also known as a king. And if you all object to this man combating against Arjuna, I make him the king of Anga. And Duryodhana right there and then takes this Karna, puts his crown on Karna. They do a coronation ceremony. The rishis chant the Vedas. And this Karna becomes the king of Anga. And Duryodhana says, now that you're the king of Anga, you are more than equal to fight with this Arjuna. And everybody was just stunned at this, because this was such a sudden, spontaneous thing that Duryodhana did. And Duryodhana said, don't you see? He is different. He looks like a Kshatriya. He is born to rule over the world. And this Karna is so grateful to Duryodhana because at that point, at his weakest point, Duryodhana rescued him. And he asks Duryodhana, what do you want? What can I give you back? And Duryodhana said, give me your friendship. And from that day, Karna sold his soul to Duryodhana. And just when they were about to engage in combat, Adhiratha comes in, the father of Karna. He comes in and everybody sees who the father of Karna is, because Karna takes the crown, puts it at his father's feet and greets his father. And they all see that he is a Sutaputra. He is the son of a charioteer. And they say, you are not worthy to fight with Arjuna. And Adhiratha is so grateful that his son was made the king of Anga. And he hugs his son in tears. And just as that happens, the sun begins to set. And therefore, Karna and Arjuna are not able to fight anymore. But the day of the tournament finishes. And everyone's wonderstruck at this new development, at this new person, Karna, who even excels Arjuna. Duryodhana walks away happy with his newfound friend. Arjuna walks away with Yudhishthira, thinking who this newfound competition is. And thus, the entry of Karna. Now, what happens is their tournament finished. And now, of course, they have the tradition of Guru Dakshina. Whenever we finish a class, a season, or whenever you finish learning something, we have the tradition of Guru Dakshina. Dronacharya decides now it's time to ask for his Guru Dakshina from all of his students. What is his Guru Dakshina? He wants Drupada captured alive because revenge is still burning in his heart, unfortunately. So he tells the Pandavas and the Kauravas, go to Drupada, capture him here, bring him to me. And first the Kauravas go, and Drupada is wondering why all of these people are challenging him. And the Kauravas are unable to challenge Drupada because he's very strong. And as the Kauravas are failing, Arjuna, Bhima, Nakula, and Sahadeva proceed to Drupada, Arjuna takes Drupada, captures him, puts him in his chariot, and he brings this Drupada to Drona. Now this Drupada is so stunned by this Arjuna. Arjuna was so skilled in capturing him. Imagine he's being captured, but he's admiring the skill of who's capturing him. He's so, so dexterous. Who could this person be? And Drupada is brought to Drona, and he looks at Drona, and Drona says, now this is the day that I seek my revenge. Now we have captured you. Now both of us are equal. Actually, I am the king now because I have your kingdom. So Drona inherited all of what Drupada had. And he says, but because we're friends, I will give you half the kingdom. Half the kingdom will belong to you, Drupada, and half will belong to me. And at this point, Dronacharya feels that his revenge is over, it's complete. Drupada was captured and brought in front of him, and he was able to get the kingdom of Drupada. So for him, he felt complete. But little did he know that in Drupada's heart, revenge was burning. And Drupada leaves and he goes elsewhere to seek something. What he goes to seek, we will find out later. So now, the Kauravas and Pandavas have finished their studies, completed their studies. Now comes the time where there has to be an heir to the throne. Now we know that Pandu was king before because Dhritarashtra could not be king because he was blind. Vidura could not be king because he was the son of a maidservant. Therefore, Pandu was king. But we know that Pandu went to the forest and Pandu had passed away. Therefore, Dhritarashtra was king, but Bhishma was running on his behalf because he couldn't, he was blind. However, the time came when he has to now crown the heir to the throne, or what we call Yuvaraja. And so he decided to crown Yudhishthira as Yuvaraja because Pandu was king, Yudhishthira was the eldest son, and Yudhishthira excelled everyone in his qualities. Everyone loved Yudhishthira, everyone, because he was so righteous. Of course, he was the son of Dharmaraj. So now he was crowned Yuvaraja, and Duryodhana didn't like this at all. He was very jealous of Yudhishthira, very jealous of Arjuna and Bhima. And he tells his father, why did you crown him Yuvaraja? And his father said, I had no choice because everybody agreed that he was the righteous heir to the throne. Therefore, I crowned him Yuvaraja. And all of the people also are talking about him. Duryodhana said, Father, I want to be king. It is not right that this kingdom goes to the Pandavas. You're king now, therefore I should be the next king. Why should we be under the rule of these Pandavas? And we have to plan something. And Dhritarashtra said, no, Duryodhana, Yudhishthira should be Yuvaraja because Pandu is the one who captured all of these communities, all of these kingdoms for me. And Duryodhana says, Dhritarashtra, he calls his father, says, Father, please tell me the truth of who you are. See, here's the difference between Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana was openly jealous and hating, openly. You could see it in his eyes, you could see it in his actions. But Dhritarashtra was hidingly jealous and hating. So outside, when people were around, he would be very hypocritical. But inside, he burned with jealousy. He burned with deceit. And so they called this minister Kanika. And they said, Kanika, what must we do to get rid of the Pandavas? Because, the Kauravas, Duryodhana wants to be the next heir. What must we do? Karnika said, the only way is death to the Pandavas. And this is what you must do. Send them away to this place called Varanavata. And in this place, we will build this palace. And this palace out of wax, which is very flammable and can burn easily. And when we send them away after some time, we will burn that palace, and therefore the Pandavas will die. And you will never hear of the Pandavas again. This was the evil plot in Duryodhana's mind. And Dhritarashtra went along with it. And so Dhritarashtra calls Yudhishthira and says, you know, you've been here for some time now. Why don't you go to this place Varanavata for about a year or so? Stay there for some time and then you can come back. Now Yudhishthira saw what was happening. He was very sharp, he was very smart. And he told his elders, Vidura, Bhishma, Drona, my uncle is sending me to Varanavata. He's sending me with my brothers and my mother. Surely he is a noble king. Surely he is like a father to us and he means well. And therefore we will go. Now, Bhishma didn't see this through this plot. However, Vidura did. When the Pandavas were leaving this kingdom of Hastinapur, everyone was so sad. They were so sad because the Pandavas were the light of Hastinapur. Everyone loved them and they were leaving this kingdom. As Yudhishthira was walking out, Vidura followed him and Vidura told him, listen Yudhishthira, you need to be very alert. Keep your senses alert. And there are weapons more dangerous than a sword. And when these weapons are used, a rat knows how to keep safe by digging a hole. So stay alert and keep watch. And all of this Vidura spoke in this Mleccha Bhasha, a different kind of language to Yudhishthira so that nobody else would hear. So Yudhishthira knew that his uncle was looking after him. They get to this place after some time of traveling. Meanwhile, Duryodhana sends his minister Purochana, tells him, make sure you construct this palace of wax and you keep an eye on the Pandavas, and after some time, when they least expect it, set fire to it. So when the Pandavas got there, after some time in Varanavata, Purochana approaches them and says, I have been ordered to build this beautiful palace for you to stay in, so please come and stay here. And so he brings them to the palace. And in the palace, outside, there's a moat. A moat is like a ditch, a body of water has been dug. And this has been dug because to make it hard for the Pandavas to escape. So they've planned everything so properly. And this Purochana went. And every day he would come back and check on the Pandavas. Once Yudhishthira and Bhima were there and they were smelling. Yudhishthira said, don't you smell something? And they discovered that this palace was in fact made out of flammable substance. It was made out of wax. And so Bhima said, let us leave right now. Let us leave this palace right now. Let us go back and let us show to the world what Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana are doing. Yudhishthira said, no, we must wait. We must wait for the right time for us to go against them when they cannot defeat us. We have to build ourselves so strongly that they won't be able to defeat us. So let us wait for the right time. And I trust my uncle, he will send someone. And lo and behold, Vidura sent somebody to build a tunnel in this palace of wax for them to escape. But the problem was Purochana kept watching them every day. So what the Pandavas would do is every day they would go outside and Purochana would go outside so that the tunnel can be dug. And finally, this tunnel was dug in the house, in that palace of wax. And they got news that this Purochana was going to set fire soon to this palace of wax. So just, maybe a day before, a few days before Purochana was going to set fire, all the Pandavas planned their escape. The tunnel was built and it was hidden under a rug. And one night, Bhima looked and he opened the rug. He told everyone, all of the Pandavas, Mother Kunti, to go in, and he set fire to the palace of wax. He set fire to the palace of wax, and they went underneath that tunnel. They went underneath that tunnel, and they went across, and they made it to the other side of the river. And the next day, the people of Varanavata saw this house of the Pandavas burnt down, and they were in tears. They said, the Pandavas and Kunti Devi are gone. How can we live? And news reached Hastinapura. And they were doing the final rites of the Pandavas. Dhritarashtra, of course, pretended to be sad, and Duryodhana pretended to be sad, and everyone around was so sad. Only Vidura knew. But then Bhishma was so heartbroken that Vidura pulled him aside and said, Bhishma, the Pandavas are alive. They've escaped. Don't you worry. And in the right time, they will appear. And Bhishma's heart was light again. However, the Pandavas decided that they will be incognito. They will be in disguise for some time until they were strong enough to go back to Hastinapur. When we look at this story, one beautiful commentator says that what the story symbolizes is we're all born in this body called Deha, Dahati, that which burns, that which it decays, it burns, it sheds. And what we have to do in this body as though is you and I have to dig a hole to detach from this body and attach to our spiritual practices, attach to our sadhana, our seva, our swadhyaya, attach to all of these things so that when this body in fact burns, we have already dug a hole and we are free. So it's a very, very beautiful way to look at this story. Meanwhile, back to our story, the Pandavas have escaped and Vidura has appointed a ferryman to take them across to a forest, another forest where they can relax. And mind you, how they escaped is so powerful. All of them were carried by Bhima. In his back, in his arms, in his hips, all of the other Pandavas and Kunti Devi were carried by Bhima. Bhima carried them. Bhima put them under a tree, and they were all so tired, and they were all so thirsty. So Yudhishthira says, Bhima, please get us some water to drink and come back. And so Bhima finds where water is, and he brings it, he drinks, and then he brings it to them. He wakes them up, gives them water, and puts them back to sleep. And Bhima says, I must stay guard this entire night. Let all of my brothers sleep. Let my dearest mother sleep. And as he was watching them, he feels so bad that this Yudhishthira, who's a Yuva Raja, is sleeping on the ground, and his mother is sleeping on the ground. He feels so bad at all of what's happening. But anyway, he keeps eye and he starts watching in case anything might happen. And meanwhile, something did happen. They reached the forest of Hidimbavana. And in this Hidimbavana, there's this Rakshasa called Hidimba. And this Rakshasa called Hidimba is a flesh-eating Rakshasa. He smelled human flesh. And he told his sister Hidimbi that I smell some human flesh and I want you to go bring them to me. Now this Hidimbi went to the site. Through her smell, she smelled and she saw Bhima and the Pandavas and Kunti Devi. And she saw such a beautiful sight that she disguised herself into a very beautiful woman. And she looks at Bhima. She says, "Who are you? You are so gorgeous. You're so muscular. Who are you?" And Bhima says, "I am Pandava. And we are the Pandavas and this is my mother. And who are you?" And she says, "My name is Hidimbi. My brother is the Rakshasa of this forest. His name is Hidimba. And he has asked me to come and take you so that he can eat all of you. But when I saw you, I fell in love. Now I cannot take you to my brother." And so this Hidimbi falls in love with Bhima. And she says, "Listen, Bhima, I can take all of you away. Let's go away now." They want to elope. She wants to elope. She says, "Let's go all away and so that my brother doesn't find us." Bhima looks at her and says, "Do you think I'm a coward? Let your brother come and let's see what happens." This Hidimbi is like, "I can carry all of you away. Let's just go now." He says, No, let your brother come." Meanwhile, this Hidimba comes. Loud noises in this dark forest. This big Rakshasa comes. And he comes and he said, "Who do you think you are in my forest? And I shouldn't have trusted my sister." And all of this he's saying. And Bhima says, "Stop talking. Let's fight." And so Bhima and this Rakshasa, Hidimba, they start fighting. And Bhima tells Hidimba, "Don't make too much noise because I don't want you to wake up my brothers and my mother." But what to do? Rakshasa and Bhima, they were fighting like crazy. The brothers woke up. Arjuna said, "Let me have a go. I've slept." Bhima said, "Don't worry, I can handle him." And so Bhima defeats this Hidimba and he dies. He passes away. And now this Hidimbi is left. And she tells Kunti Devi and Yudhishthira, "I've fallen in love with your brother." And Yudhishthira says, "Bhima, I know what you're thinking. I'm the eldest and I'm not married. So therefore, how can you marry?" But he says, "It's okay, you marry." And so this Bhima and Hidimbi, they get married. And they enjoy a very nice married life. So he stays with Hidimbi. And after 7 months, Hidimbi gives birth to this beautiful boy, Gatotkacha. And this Gatotkacha is a gem in Mahabharata. Just what he does, we will see a little bit later. But he becomes the little nephew of the Pandavas. They all love him, especially Yudhishthira. But then Bhima says, "Now I will have to go." Because Vedavyasa came and said, "Once your son is born, you must leave. You must go right away." And so Bhima parts with Hidimbi and says, "I'll have to go, but when I think of you, please come to me." And so they go to this next place called Ekachakra. Now this Ekachakra, they have to be careful of their disguises. So they disguise themselves as Brahmanas. They disguise themselves as Brahmanas so that nobody will notice them, because you never know, Duryodhana has spies everywhere. What will happen? So anyway, in this Ekachakra forest. They stay with a Brahmin family and they go for Bhiksha every day. One day, most of the Pandavas were out. Kunti Devi was there. They were staying with this Brahmana family, and Kunti Devi heard them crying. She heard them crying. And so she said, "Why are you all crying?" So they told her this story that, in our city here in Ekachakra, there's this demon called Bakasura. And this Bakasura, every time he used to just come whenever he wanted, and he used to eat flesh. He used to come and just eat anybody at random. And so finally, all of us villagers, we couldn't take it anymore. We told Bakasura, stop eating everyone at random because it's so hard for us. Every week, we will send you a cart full of food and we will send you one person. Each family will sacrifice one person so you don't go on these hungry riots and start eating everybody. So this Bakasura agreed. So Kunti Devi said, so then what happened? So the Brahmana family said, it's our turn tomorrow. It's our turn to be eaten by Bakasura. And so I told them that I will go, but my wife said she won't be able to live without me. And if my wife goes, I won't be able to live without her. And if either of one go, the children won't be able to leave us. So we decided all four of us will go with a cartload of food to Bakasura. So this Bakasura, too much trouble he caused. So Kunti Devi said, don't worry about it. My son will take care. They said, no. You're a guest in our house. You're staying with us. How can you do this? She said, no. My son is very strong. I know my son. When I was very young, I was holding my son and a tiger came and I dropped my son and he rolled down on the ground and he hit a rock and the rock got crushed and my son was still sleeping. He is very, very strong. I know he can handle it. And so Kunti Devi, Bhima was there, other Pandavas were out. She tells Bhima, tomorrow you will have to go to Bakasura. Bhima was so happy. She said, you are going to get a cartload of food. He said, food? Wow, I'm so excited. He was so happy to eat the food, and she said, you will be fed before, and you'll also get a cartload of food, and you'll go to Bakasura. This Bhima was incredibly happy. Now Yudhishthira came home, and he saw Bhima was smiling. He said, what happened? He said, I'm going to go to Bakasura. Yudhishthira was crushed and he was talking to Kunti Devi and he said, how can you send my brother there? Don't you know that he's the strongest one? Here is where we see the quality of Kunti Devi, the strength and the faith in her son. Imagine what mother would say, send my son to Bakasura. What mother would say that? She had so much faith, so much strength to tell everybody, my son can do it. That boldness of Kunti Devi. And she knew that this family had to be protected. And she was willing to risk their lives for it. And so Yudhishthira understood Kunti Devi's strength. And so the next day, of course, Bhima goes with his cartload of food to Bakasura. And on the way, while going there, he said, now why should Bakasura eat this food? So he ate all of the food. He said, after I fight with Bakasura, I'll be unclean. I won't be able to eat all of this. Let me eat. Oh, he ate. And he was still eating his curd. And this Bakasura came and said, how can you eat all my food? And Bhima said, wait, I'm not yet finished. And he slurped the curd nicely. And with one hand, he was fighting with Bakasura. And this fight went on and on and on because this Bakasura is very strong. But then Bhima, he defeated this Bakasura. And he took the body of Bakasura and he dragged it to the gates of the city so that everybody could see that Bakasura was dead the next morning. He dragged it at night so nobody could see him. But in the morning, he wanted everyone to see that Bakasura was dead. So that way, nobody would have fear. And so the next morning, everyone came to the Brahmana's house and they said, it was your turn to go. And who went? Who is it that went? Who defeated the Bakasura? And the Brahmana family couldn't say because Kunti Devi said, don't tell anybody. So they said they prayed to God and God performed a miracle and Bakasura passed. So like this, the Pandavas were so strong and always keeping or making sure that people around them were protected. One night, they had a visitor in the house of this Brahmana. One visitor came, and this visitor was another Brahmana also, who was going from house to house, house to house. And so they welcomed him, and the tradition before was whoever comes, you feed them, talk to them. So he started talking. So they inquired, they said, okay, why have you come here? So he said, I'm traveling from town to town, but the real reason that I'm here is I am to tell everybody about Draupadi's Swayamvara. Draupadi's Swayamvara. So he said, you know the story between Drona and Drupada. So now the Pandavas are listening to this. Huh? So imagine this Brahmana is there. The Pandavas are listening to the story of Drona and Drupada about that whole revenge. How, Drupada insulted Drona. And then after that, Drona had Drupada captured. And he tells them the latter half of the story. Where did Drupada go? What happened to Drupada was, he went and he wanted to take revenge on Drona. So he found two priests, Yaja and Upayaja. And he said, I want to do this Putrakameshti Yaga. And in this Yaga, I want a son that's going to defeat this Dronacharya. And I want a daughter who's going to be married to Arjuna. And so this Drupada does this yajna, this fire sacrifice, and he invokes these emotions, these feelings with the help of these priests. And out from that fire comes Drishtadyumna, already young. He doesn't come as a baby, already young. He already comes with his armor and everything. And this Drishtadyumna was born to kill Drona. And after that, the most beautiful lady in the entire Kuru dynasty comes. And she signifies the destruction of the entire Kuru race. And who is this princess born of fire? Her name is Krishna. Krishna means the feminine of Krishna is Krishna, the one who's dark. So her name is Krishna or Draupadi. And she comes to life. And with the birth of these two, Drupada is incredibly happy. Now, little bit about Drupada before we go back into this. Drupada has a son called Satyajit with Kokila Devi, and to him was also born Shikandi. That Shikandi, who was a girl, Shikandini, who became Shikandi, became a boy, who was in the previous birth Amba, that Shikandi was born to Drupada. Okay, so imagine now, Drupada has Satyajit, has Shikandi, has Drishtadyumna, has Draupadi. Now look at this Drupada. Shikandi is the destruction of Bhishma. Okay. Drishtadyumna is the destruction of Drona. Draupadi is the destruction of all of the Kshatriyas. These are his children. This is called Drupada. So now he tells them about Drupada's story, about Draupadi. And he says now there is a Swayamvara in the city of Kampilya in Panchala. And Drupada is hoping that somehow Arjuna will come. And Arjuna's listening to the story, huh? Because when Drupada heard that the Pandavas died, he became very sad. But the rishis told him the yajna cannot go false. The Pandavas must still be alive. Therefore, I am going from house to house, spreading the news of this Swayamvara in a hope that maybe the Pandavas will hear this story. And not knowing the Pandavas were actually hearing the story. And so this Brahmana left, and the Pandavas couldn't sleep the whole night. They were just thinking about Draupadi and this Swayamvara and how exciting this would be. But they all kept quiet because who's the boss? Kunti Devi's the boss. She's the boss. So the next day, Kunti Devi, of course, looks at all of them and says, you know, we can't keep begging Bhiksha in the same place all the time. We must go to a new place. Let us go to Kampilya. Let's go to Panchala. Try out the Swayamvara and see what happens. Oh, they were too happy. They all went. Now, they're in disguise, okay? They're in disguise as Brahmanas. And of course, they find a Brahmana house to stay in. They all went to Kampilya. And the day of the Swayamvara is about to begin. And all the princes of all dynasties were there. Duryodhana was there. Karna was there. Ashwatthama was there. Drona was there. Oh, this Jayadratha was there. This Shalya was there. Oh, so many kings, so many princes. Bhagavan Krishna and Balarama were also there. So many people were there. And Drishtadyumna announces and says, welcome to everybody. And Drupada is there, Drishtadyumna is there. And Drupada made the challenge very, very hard because somewhere in his heart, he still believed that maybe Arjuna would come. And so they had to string this bow, which was extremely difficult to do. And in the ceiling, there was a fish, which was rotating. And they had to shoot 5 arrows. And 5 arrows, they had to bring that target down. And this was very difficult to do. So Drupada and Drishtadyumna, they announced the challenge. They said that anybody who can do this will marry Draupadi. And out came Draupadi, extremely beautiful. She had like long curly hair. She had lotus eyes, and everybody just looked at her, and everybody was ready. Now there were Kshatriyas there were Brahmanas there were all different people there. But of course, this was a Kshatriya thing to do, a Swayamvara. So the Kshatriyas tried one by one. Duryodhana, Shalya, all of them went up, but each one of them failed. Even Karna tried, but he also failed. And the Kshatriyas just looked at each other at disdain, like, how come they couldn't do it? And so Arjuna, in disguise as a Brahmana, said, can a Brahmana try? He looked at Drupada. Can a Brahmana try? And they said, yes, okay, we don't see why not. If the Kshatriyas weren't able to do it, then maybe the Brahmana could do it. We'll see. So they were all curious looking. This Arjuna got up. He made pradakshina to the bow. He took the bow very easily, very quickly. He took the arrow and 5 arrows he shot, and the target was put down. And Everyone was stunned at who is this Brahmana? Who is this Brahmana with such ease, with such dexterity, took the bow and arrow in his hand and shot the target which none of the Kshatriyas could do? Who's this Brahmana? And Draupadi was given to this Brahmana. Now the Kshatriyas were appalled. They said, how can this be? How can this Brahmana take away Draupadi? What is this? We're being insulted here. And so they wanted to fight Arjuna. And by this time, Yudhishthira, Nakula, and Sahadeva, they're proceeding to leave. And Bhima and Arjuna are there. And they said, we'll fight this Brahmana. So all of the other Brahmanas said, we will help you, we'll protect you. Arjuna said, don't worry, we got it. And Arjuna and Bhima, single-handedly, both of them were defeating all of these Kshatriyas. And they were just wondering, who is this? And it so happened that Karna was fighting Arjuna. Karna was fighting Arjuna, and he said, who are you? What Brahmana are you? There are only two people I know who can equal me in this valor, and that's Indra and Arjuna. I don't know who you are. Arjuna said, I'm just a Brahmana who studied this warfare. And Karna said, I surrender to you. You have truly got skill. You are very skilled. And so Arjuna, Bhima, and Draupadi, they all left. And everyone was just stunned at who these Brahmanas were. Now, meanwhile, what happens? What happens is they all bring Draupadi home. Now, Mother Kunti, she wasn't looking, but they said, they said, Mother, we have brought our bhiksha, because every night they go for bhiksha. And so Kunti Devi said, whatever it is, you share it amongst yourself. And then she looked and she saw Draupadi. And she said, what have I said? Why have I said that? And Yudhishthira said, that is the words of our mother. So what do we do? And Yudhishthira said, Arjuna, you should marry Draupadi because you had won the Swayamvara. And Arjuna said, Yudhishthira, you're the eldest. I cannot marry unless you marry first, and then Bhima, and then me. And then Yudhishthira thought for a moment, and he said, the words of my mother must not go false. There is something in me telling me that this is right. And so therefore, Draupadi will be the wife of all five of us. Now, very puzzling, very, very puzzling. But meanwhile, while this is all happening, the Pandavas, they get a visitor. Someone knocks on their door. And who is that person? Lord Krishna comes to see them. Krishna and Balarama come to see them. And Krishna is so happy. He comes, he does namaskar to Kunti Devi and to Yudhishthira, because he's younger than Yudhishthira and they're cousins. And so does Balarama. And Krishna Bhagavan says, I knew it had to be the Pandavas. I knew it had to be the Pandavas. Who else but Arjuna could have shot that target? And they are so happy. They meet each other, they hug. And Krishna says, before anybody finds out, I will leave, but we will meet again. So Krishna blesses him. And then somebody else comes. And this somebody else was Drishtadyumna. This Drishtadyumna was peeking to see where his sister went, because Drupada was in a way happy, but in a way sad, because he didn't know who he gave his daughter to. And so he told his son, you please find out where my daughter is. Is she okay? What kind of family is she in? And Drishtadyumna, he was peeking and he saw 5 men. One elderly lady and his sister. His sister looked very happy. And they were all talking, but they were not talking like Brahmanas. They were talking about warfare and weapons. And so this Drishtadyumna had a doubt, and he thought, I think it's the Pandavas. And he goes and he tells his father, Father, I think Draupadi must be with the Pandavas. And his father sends an invitation to them to please come to the kingdom so that they can be married to Draupadi. And so all of them go to the kingdom of Drupada. And they introduce themselves and they say, we are the Pandavas. And Drupada is so extremely happy. So happy because he loved Pandu. Pandu and him knew each other. And he was so happy that the Pandavas were alive. And he says, okay, I give my daughter to Arjuna. And Yudhishthira says, but I am the eldest, so I must marry first. So Drupada says, okay, whoever you say, she will marry. Yudhishthira says, actually, she must marry all 5 of us. That is what our mother had said. And Drupada is so extremely puzzled. What do you mean she must marry all 5 of you? And there comes Bhagavan Vedavyasa. Bhagavan Vedavyasa tells them, this is the story of Draupadi. In her previous life, she wasn't able to find a husband. And so she prayed to Bhagavan Shiva. She does tapasya. She prays to Bhagavan Shiva for a husband. And Lord Shiva says, okay, I will bless you with 5 husbands. And she said, but I only want 1 husband. And we can understand because 1 husband or 1 wife is more than enough. She says, I only want 1 husband. Lord Shiva says, but you asked me 5 times. Because you asked me 5 times, in your next birth, you will be born to Drupada and you will have 5 husbands. And therefore, Vedavyasa said, because of this story, Draupadi will have 5 husbands. And therefore, Draupada's heart was calmed and Draupadi marries the 5 Pandavas. Now, what happens after this? Where do they go? This we will see in our next class. Divine Mother's Grace. Yeah? Okay, so we'll see the closing prayer now. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Hari Om everyone.